up, everybody? All right, so I'm gonna put some pictures in here in this video to kind of show what I did in the past for my fuel pump scenario, but we're running into a problem. I've turned the boost up since being on the dyno to 15 psi roughly. I have some new wastegate springs coming in. I maxed out the boost on what I could obtain with the wastegate springs that I have. I believe they're 7-pound springs, and with the electronic boost controller you can only really double the boost of what this when the spring opens. So I'm going to put about 11 pounds worth of spring in there so that the spring will open at 11 psi, and then I can essentially double that to 20-ish psi. But right now my goal, I want to turn it up to 15, 16 psi. I managed to get it up to about 15 psi the other day, but I noticed that my injector duty cycle was spiking a bit. So I went back and looked through the logs, and my fuel pressure will not go above 50 psi. So I have my static fuel pressure set at 40 psi, and so that's with the vacuum disconnected on the regulator. So basically that would be like 100 kPa, no vacuum. On a naturally aspirated engine, it'd be wide open throttle. So disconnect it, start the truck, set the static PSI to 40. That way when I hit zero vacuum, 100 kPa, we're at that static. And then when I'm in idle, I'm idling around 30 PSI. The Megasquirt controls all this and does all the calculations. And then as boost comes in, fuel pressure rises 1-to-1, 1 PSI per 1 PSI boost with boost. So what I'm getting now is fuel pressure rises to 50 psi, so 10 psi on this worth of boost, and then it stops and it stays there. And no matter how high I go on the boost, it stays at 50, which spikes the injector duty cycle. And so it's pretty obvious I'm running out of pump. Now I have an Aeromotive 450 liter per hour pump in there called Aeromotive. They said that pump's good for roughly 800 horsepower. Based on what I made at the tire and what I'm making now that I've turned the boost up, I'm probably right at 800 horsepower flywheel, right around there. I think we calculated when I was at about 610 wheel horsepower, we were probably right around 750 flywheel, which is, you know, it's going through a 1-ton transmission, a 1-ton drivetrain. It's heavy 35-inch tires, so it has a lot of parasitic loss on the drivetrain. So it makes sense that it'd be right around 750, and now that I've turned it up, probably closer to 800 or over 800, which I'm at the limit on this single Aeromotive 450 pump. So the plan now is to go dual pumps. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to turn the pump on manually, drain the tank. I'll disconnect the return line and drain it into a bucket or a fuel jug, and then we will drop the tank, and so I'll end up doing a custom fuel hanger, which I'll record and show you guys using the stock, where it's a stock forward sending unit top hat deal, and I'm going to modify that to hold the dual pumps. But that's what before I'll show a photo in here, that's what I use to hang the single 450. So now we're going dual pumps. It's not going to be too complex. It's going to be the same deal. I'm looking at doing dual 340 liter per hour pumps. So 680 liters. Sorry, my math is terrible here. 680 liters per hour, which should be enough. It's from Racetronix is the company, but I can pretty much order from anywhere. I just like the way that they have it set up for the hanger. But that pump says it's good for 1400 horsepower. And so that'll be plenty pump for me, and also give me some room for E85 later on down the road. So here's a data log. This is from the dyno session, just to show you guys. So we got this top line up here is TPS, that solid green line, and then down on the bottom here we're data logging boost and fuel pressure. So it kind of trails. So right here, fuel pressure is 43.5, boost is 5.6. So we're behind about 2 psi where it should be on target. Pressure rises with boost. Here we're a 4 psi difference where it should be consistent. So it should be 53.4. Instead we're at 49.4 on fuel pressure. And then Up top, the fuel pressure starts getting a little bit erratic. 47.5, it drops off, then it comes back up to 50, and then drops off again. So it's not quite keeping up with boost. I'll find another data log here to show you when I turned it up. But I turned the boost up to about 15 psi, and fuel pressure just will not go over 50. Here's another quick rep on a data log. Boost hit 14 psi, fuel pressure is only 49. So we're 5 psi short. So it's really not the biggest issue at the moment, but I believe I'm maxing this pump out, and my concern is that it's just not going to keep up, and I want to turn it up a little bit more. So gonna have to do some work here. Hey guys, all right, so we got the tank dropped out of the truck. I didn't film that part, but it's pretty simple. There's 4 bolts and you disconnect the lines and the wiring harness. But so here's the tank. I pumped most of, just turned the pump on manually on the truck. With the ECU on the Mega Squirt, you can just flip it on. Pumped out as much fuel as I could, and now I'm just doing the last little bit here with the siphon. So once we get that guy empty, then we'll be able to kind of check for height and stuff on our new pump. This here's my old one. So that's the Aeromotive 450. This is how I build it. So that stainless steel line there is the return. This is the fuel level gauge switch sender deal. So it just drops in this hole right here, and then it uses the Ford stock lock ring, and that's it. Pretty simple. So the new setup's going to be dual pumps right there. Comes with a little holder. I'm still waiting for it to come in the mail, but I'll update you guys when I get it in there. So I will just rig that up to this aluminum bracket once I get it. When I initially did this, I didn't have my aluminum welder, so I used these screws to hold this together. I'm going to just weld that up a little bit. It's just for a little extra security, make sure it's nice and strong. But it's worked well so far. The only issue I had was I found out that my filter, the sock that goes on the end of the pump, came off, and it's inside the tank there loose. So working on that, but in the meantime, while I'm waiting for my new fuel pump, I got my new wastegate springs from Mamba. So I'm going to be doing 2. Right now the wastegate has 1 spring in it. I'm going to run these 2, which should net me about 11 pounds of boost, which gives me more room on my electronic wastegate controller. So I'm going to install those guys real fast, and this will probably be one video with the fuel tank install, so it's going to be filmed in little increments here, but my new fuel pump I ordered from Racetronix out of Canada, and it should ship here in a couple days, and it's 2-day shipping, so I'm hoping to have this done by next weekend. All right, guys. So it's been about a week since I started making this video. My Racetronix fuel pump came in the mail, so I'll show you guys that. And I got started on building the bracket for it. So here's the Racetronix pump. So this is the twin. They're a little scratched up. That's from me putting it in and out of the tank a bunch of times trying to get my angles right here. But so it comes with this stainless steel bracket that sandwiches the pumps into place. And then it has 2 holes here and there where you mount it. So what I did is I made a bracket out of aluminum. I welded a piece of angle onto a flat plate so it's nice and rigid, and then screwed that to the aluminum plate. So this Racetronix guy comes with this billet. I guess it's like a Y, but it connects the 2. They use O-rings at the top of the pump, and they go inside this machined housing, and then they convert into one. Both these pumps have what's it called, the valve that doesn't let the fuel pressure pump back into the other one. They both have those pumps, or both those valves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stage these pumps. One pump will be wired to factory wiring and will turn on, key on, just like normal. The second pump, I'm going to use a bulkhead fitting, mount it somewhere on the top of this hat, and then wire that pump in to the Mega Squirt, so that I'll show you guys in the computer here. But so what that does is that will turn on the second pump as soon as I get into boost. So first pump will be running, key on, normal driving. As soon as we get into boost, second pump kicks on, by the Mega Squirt. No Hob switch or anything like that needed. The Mega Squirt will completely control it based on kPa or map pressure. So yeah, so it's pretty seamless. I already have the expansion harness for my Mega Squirt system through the Pimp XS. So the expansion harness is an additional upgrade to the Pimp XS ECU. It plugs into the ECU, and then you run the wiring harness for the expansion into the engine bay or wherever. But it gives you a bunch of options for more inputs and outputs. Lets you run Bluetooth, CAN. It'll have you can do flex fuel, bunch of different things. So I've been using it so far for a few features, but not all of them. So I have several outputs and inputs left over. There's 3 inputs for nitrous, one input, 2 outputs for nitrous, so like 2 stages of nitrous. There's a ton of features, more than I can even remember off the top of my head, but I'll be using more of the nitrous pins to control the second pump. So as soon as we get into boost, second pump kicks on through that output. All right, here's the final version. So sending units mounted. I got it mounted kind of high, so there will be a little bit of fuel left in the bottom when it says it's empty. Pumps are on. Just need to finish up my wiring and connect the feed line. I double checked, there's my return, that stainless steel line. Set this down without breaking it. The stainless steel line here is the fuel return. It's come down here below the level of the pumps. I got about an inch below the pumps in the tank. Maybe not quite an inch, but right around there. It's enough not to worry about the tank sucking up. The pumps are going down right in that hole. It's the lowest part. So they're about level with the raised part there. So they're down in that hole just a tad. So it's kind of a sump. There's no baffling in this tank. So ideally I would have a new tank. I don't really want to weld on this one since I've been using it. But I'd cut it open, put some baffles in there, but I'm not going to go that far this time. So yeah, so just got to run feed line, wire up. This pump will kick on, regular power wires. This pump will kick on by the ECU when I get into boost. So I'm going to vacuum out the tank just because I've been putting the pump in and out a bunch of times and whatnot. I think there's some debris like aluminum shavings and stuff in there. I'm going to vacuum that out, blow everything out with air, and then do my final assembly. I want to do one more test on the fuel level gauge just to make sure. So got one wire connected to on the multimeter to the feed wire, one to the housing. The gauge or the switch grounds out on the actual body of the pump. So here's the ohms. That'd be at empty. And if I raise this all the way up, 150, that's full. So gauge appears to be working like it's supposed to. I'm happy about that. All right, here it is. So fuel sender. Twin 340 pumps. So twin 340 pumps fit in the stock fuel hole with a custom aluminum bracket adapted to the stock top hat. Turned out real dang good. So just need to get my bulkhead fitting for the second set of wires for the second fuel pump and I'll be ready to install it. Alright, so it's installed back in there. Bulkhead fitting for the second pump. So these are the second pump's power and ground. And then the first stage pump will be factory connector. These are slip fit for the AN adapter lines. So they just snap over the factory forward hard line. And then AN lines go up to that. So we're ready to throw it back in the truck. So I got my mess of wiring here I need to go through. This loom here is the NOx sensor. I'm definitely not a wiring expert, but down in here, that's the relay for the second pump. So it kicks on. This is the expansion harness for the Pimp XS. And there's a wire on here set up for nitrous. There's actually 3 wires for nitrous. So I wired the input for the second pump to be the nitrous 1 pin. So essentially when that nitrous pin gets triggered, it grounds the solenoid, which turns the solenoid on. So pretty simple wiring. Solenoid gets connected to straight to the battery, to the alternator, so it's getting 14.5 volts. And then from the blue trigger wire gets connected to a switched 12 volt. So when the key turns on, that one gets power. And then the ground is controlled by the Mega Squirt through the nitrous pin. It's similar how you would set up a nitrous system. I just have it triggering the second fuel pump to kick on at a preset manifold boost pressure kPa. Solenoid for the first, it's dirty as hell down here. Solenoid for the first pump is right there. I'm sorry, not solenoid, the relay. The relay for the first pump is right there. And then there's the lines coming off the tank. I had to notch the body a little bit to make room in the bed, but. So in Tuner Studio, to set up this output, once you have the expansion harness connected to the Pimp XS or Pimp X, depending on which version you have, you go to Advanced Engine, down to Programmable Outputs, and then here you got a bunch of different options for your outputs. So the one I used was nitrous 1, that's the nitrous 1 pin, and then I just put fuel pressure or fuel pump 2 there, just in parentheses so I don't change it around and confuse myself. So this is whether or not you want it on when you turn the key on. So that's off. And then the active value on. It's checked to be enabled. So active value means that you want these bottom values to work you want the pump to turn on when these are met, these conditions are met. So I have it set up for manifold pressure greater than 105. And then this is the cushion. So if I'm like hovering right at 105, it will be 15 kPa, kind of a cushion, so it's not on and off, on and off, on and off. I can probably set that to 10, but I have it at 15, so it'll turn on at 105, and then if I drop to 90, it'll turn back off, essentially, is my understanding. Pretty simple. And then you can easily test it before starting the truck and going for a drive, or you go to CAN bus test modes, outputs test mode IO, so that's inputs and outputs. And then here I can enable the test mode, I can turn fuel pump on, I can pulse it, so that's the main fuel pump, and then PP4 nitrous 1, that's the second fuel pump. So I can turn that on and that'll activate that relay and crank up the second pump. So I tested everything before I drove the truck to make sure I had it wired correctly, which I didn't at first. I went on the Pimp Stinger Performance forum. Those guys helped me out. Their customer service is pretty damn good. They're not the best of explaining things sometimes, or at least I'm too stupid to understand what they're saying. But yeah, no, it works out good, and they're extremely helpful. So right now I have my boost controller turned off because I don't know. The springs that I put in are for 11 psi, but I want to make sure, so I'm being safe. So I have boost controller turned off, so there's no bleeding off the air. We're on spring only, and then I put my max kPa at 215, which is about 15 psi. So we are going to, or actually I think it's closer to 16 psi, but I'm gonna go take it for another spin and data log that and make sure my wastegates are opening like they're supposed to. All right, guys, the truck's up and running. Just took it out for a rip to test the new fuel pumps, make sure they're turning on when they're supposed to. Everything's perfect, so I'll show you guys what it looks like on the data log. Okay, so here's the data log from my drive. At the same time doing these fuel pumps, I installed new wastegate springs, so I'm a little bit hesitant to get into boost, and I also didn't want, with the new wastegate springs, I didn't want to overboost, but I also wanted to make sure that fuel pump was kicking on at the right time. So bottom line's down here. We have the red line is boost pressure, and the green line's fuel pressure. So you can see as the green boost pressure starts going up, so we're at 0 there. So I have my static pressure set at 39.5, so almost right on. And that's standard Ford fuel roll pressure. I try to keep the base as low as I can. That way I can ramp it in with boost and get more flow out of the pumps. But you see this right here, where the cursor is, there's this spike. That's the second fuel pump kicking on. So I have it set to turn on at 105 kPa, which is, right, map pressure, 105.5. It kicks in. And then fuel pressure immediately jumps from 39.8 to almost 43. And then it holds and rises with boost. So I get a max boost here of, looks like 4.5 psi, and fuel pressure's 45. So it's climbing like it's supposed to. I'm going to keep rolling into it, easing in on it just to make sure I'm not running out of pump or if I need to change where it kicks on at. But so far so good. Everything's working like it's supposed to. All right, guys, back from my drive. Went really well. I'll show you guys the data log. The truck is ripping. Unfortunately, my GoPro died on me while I was filming, so I only got one good clip of me doing like a partial pull. Woo! Holy shit! That had to be 14 psi. That could not have been 11 psi. I did a few more like wide open solid pulls. Truck's pretty impressive. So just on wastegate alone, off the hit, it builds up about 14, almost 15 psi, 14.5 psi, and then tapers off to 13 and holds 13 all the way out. So it's a little bit more spring than I wanted, but it'll do. And I'll be able to ramp it up with the electronic boost controller so that it holds about 14, 15 the whole way out, and then I have room to go up top later on. So let me show you guys the data log. All right, so here we are. This is the last pull I did. So like normal, top line up here green, that's TPS. So when that holds solid flat, that's me wide open throttle. The red line above that's manifold pressure. That's in KPA. Down here, red line's boost. So where the cursor's at there is 13.7 psi. Fuel pressure's 55 psi. So that's actually about 2 psi over our target. So we're building extra pressure there. And then vehicle speed at the bottom there. So start the pull back here. And start getting into boost. So off the hit right away. So I hit it about 2,500 RPM. We get into boost about 2,500, 2,700 RPM. Start building pressure here. So it's already 2,700 RPM. We're already at 2 psi boost. And then keep going. Fuel pressure is rising with boost like it should. So right off the hit, we're hitting 14.6 psi. So that's quite a bit. Fuel pressure showing 56. So if it was a 1-to-1, it would be 54.6. So we're a little over, which is good. It means I have plenty of fuel. And then it ramps up. Keep going into the pull. We taper off to about 13 psi, and it keeps on running up. Yeah, so picking up some pretty good speed there. Obviously on a closed course in Mexico. No, it's on private property and I'm not driving. So anyways, air fuel ratios are within 1% of target. We're a little fat down here. I think I hit about 11.2, 11.3 AFR when I'm shooting for 11.5, but that red and white line there in the middle, that's red line's AFR target, white line's actual AFR. So with this extra fuel, my tune's a little off, so I'll be just smoothing that back out. But yeah, she's ripping. I'm real happy with this. Wastegate springs give me a little bit more boost than I want, but it's fine. It's controllable, and I'll be able to turn it up with electronic boost controller up here up top. You always get a little bit more down when you first hit it for the wastegates to open and catch up, and then once they level out, that's usually what you're shooting for. So these are 13 psi springs essentially, which is I was hoping for 11, but this will do. Here's the data log on that first pull that I included with the video here, where my GoPro, right before my GoPro died. One thing I wanted to show on here is it's a short pull, and it's hard to tell from the GoPro, but the truck pulled from 40 miles per hour to 70, 60, 68, and it did that in 2 seconds, a little less than 2 seconds. So that's pretty dang fast. 40 to 70 in less than 2 seconds. All right, so we're gonna wrap this video up here. I appreciate everybody watching. So we accomplished some pretty good stuff here. So I got the new wastegate springs. We went from about a 7-8 psi wastegate spring to what's looking like 13 psi. It hits on the hit, it gets up to about 14.5 psi and then settles into 13 and holds that all the way out. So that gives me room on the electronic boost controller to ramp that up a bit. So I'll probably ramp it up to where it stays about 14.5 the whole way out, maybe 15, 16 up on the top end. So that's fine. That's where I want to be. I'm working on getting some methanol from a local source here that sells pure methanol, and I'll be mixing that with distilled water, so do like a 70-30 mix just to add a little bit more safety for those higher boost levels. But with the new fuel pumps, so now we went from a single Aeromotive 450 liter per hour pump to twin 340 liter per hour pumps from Racetronix. And then those are staged, controlled by the Mega Squirt. So first pump kicks on just like normal, turn the key, primes the system, first pump kicks on. And then once we get into boost, start building about a PSI or so, the second pump kicks on with fuel demand and spikes up. And then we maintain about 2 PSI over static pressure, over target pressure throughout the RPM range, which is solid. I'd rather have more than less, like before where I was about 5-6 PSI below target. So we're doing good there. I wanted to do dual 450 liter per hour pumps from the Aeromotive pumps or Walbros, which are the TI Automotive. I think they're all the same anyways, but I wasn't able to figure out a way to get those to fit in the stock Ford fuel tank opening. And that was my goal, was to have it something that someone could follow along with me if they have a similar build and they end up getting to a power level where I'm at, where they need dual pumps, that they can install 2 pumps into the tank staged like I'm doing, and it fits perfectly. So all you gotta do is I used an aluminum flat plate with a 90-degree corner and angle iron, welded that together, and then used that as a drop bracket to hold it down in place. Worked out really well. Racetronix has a stainless steel bracket that comes with the 2 pumps that mounts them together, so it's super simple to do. And then I was able to use the stock fuel sending unit and it all fit in there just fine. So that's a good deal for anybody trying to do a stock deal like I did. Yeah, so pretty good video. So we got our springs and we got our fuel pumps in, and we got enough fuel now to support 1400 horsepower on 92 octane and about 1000 on E85, which will be happening at some point, I imagine. But for now, I want to see what I can make happen on pump gas with the water methanol injection. I'm heading to pick and pull day after tomorrow, Monday morning. We're going to go pull, they just got a Suburban in with a 6-liter and a 4L80E. We're going to pull that, and hopefully there's a couple 5.3s. I want to get at least a 5.3 and a 4L60E as a side project. I really want to build a turbo LS something. I have a soft spot for Toyotas. I've had pretty much every generation Toyota pickup there is, and a few 4Runners in the mix there, but my first truck was an 83 Toyota pickup, and it's just gone on since there. I've had a few rock crawlers, a few solid axle swap rigs, stuff like that. So I'm big into Toyotas. My area in Pacific Northwest, there's a pretty good snow wheeling out here, so I'm thinking turbo LS, Toyota, like let's say an 86, 87 solid axle swap, extended cab, or an 85 if I can find it, with a turbo LS. I think that'd be pretty freaking rowdy. But you know, it's just a future project coming up. So we'll be hitting the junkyard on Monday, guys. I appreciate everybody watching. Please subscribe, like the channel. We managed to get over 1,000 subscribers over the last couple weeks, so the channel's growing. It's getting there. But I appreciate you guys, and see you next time.